All right, so a couple of things we wanted to discuss when it comes to things that you should be considering when you're creating advertisements. And so we want to walk you through the market awareness stages. This is stuff that we have to give credit where credit is due to Eugene Schwartz. Also about market sophistication, which we'll dig into, kind of the cycle that every industry tends to go through. Selling to emotions and outcomes. Want to get Alan's take on that as well, because we kind of discussed it before and you had some things to say about that. And then we'll move on to the next section. But to kind of start off with the market awareness, this was a really important discovery for us. I mean, this is something that we knew, but when we created the 2 Hour Agency offer and we were kind of trying to convert people who bought a book into, a five, six, $10,000 buyer, we realized that we kind of forgot about the fact that we have to increase people's awareness about the problems they have, the solutions that we have to offer, the products that we offer, and so on. So when we put out content, or when I created content, it wasn't often sort of as strategic as it should have been. So I'll just kind of walk you through, and we'll have a graph for you to look at. But there's basically 5 different market awareness stages. So basically somebody can go from unaware to problem aware to solution aware to product aware and to most aware. And of course, the more aware they are, the easier the sale is going to be. And the easiest way to think about that is, somebody that goes to Google and types in like black shorts, they're product or most aware, right? Like they've already decided what they're buying and they don't really need to be sort of convinced. They don't need to be told that, hey, you should get shorts instead of working out in long pants. I don't know. But, the point is they're at one level of awareness, and then you can have somebody who is completely unaware. And so when you are approaching that person, you're going to have to do that in a different way. And the other thing that's interesting about these 5 different stages is basically if you start from the most aware and you go to product solution, sort of reverse, the market gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the unaware market is the biggest market and sort of where most of the money probably is, but it's also the most difficult thing to sort of crack because you're dealing now with people who don't know they have a problem, not really looking for a solution, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we'll just kind of go through these a little bit and talk about, how to maybe approach each one. And so I think it might be easy actually to start from the most aware. We kind of touched on this before and how why retargeting is really effective is because the people that you're retargeting to, their level of awareness is much higher than somebody who's completely unaware, right? So when you are running ads to that awareness level, sometimes all you need to do is put the product name and the price and the ad and your work is done because they've already been to your sales page, maybe even to your order form and so on, and they just didn't buy for whatever reason. You could put, bonuses. And Alan, maybe you can tell them about the sort of branded search that we did on Google and YouTube and the effects that we got, or the results rather, that we got from that.
Yeah, so when it comes to the most aware market, it basically, as Robert said, it's just like people are hyper aware of what you do. And so typically in the most aware market, you're going to be close to utility, right? So the way it works is like least aware is like more of a commodity space where most aware is utility space, right? So, for example, like where you live, the electric company, everybody knows that, right? And so like they don't really need to do much thing to educate what electricity is, what they do. They just know everybody knows what it works, and so like the only thing they gotta do is run just branded ads. So what a lot of people don't do is, for example, let's say somebody out there will run Facebook ads, Google ads, YouTube ads to generate sales, but then they don't run anything on search as far as branded ads go. Now, one of the secrets that we have that's really really powerful is running branded ads on shopping, like Google Shopping, and that typically has the highest ROAS in existence right now, right? So if you're running, let's say, for example, to our agency, and somebody's searching Google for that, it needs to pop up as the top 2 listings, and then but also under shopping, right? Because shopping gets placed on top as a row search, especially also on mobile. So that helps a tremendous amount. So that's basically branded ads, and also you can do it on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, etc. And the main purpose of branded ads is just to keep top of mind awareness, right? Because whenever there's a market when there's profit margin to be had, it attracts new competitors, right? The only time people don't want to enter a market when there's when there's barrier to entry or there's there's no profit margins to be had. As long as there's profit margins to be had and barrier to entry is low, meaning it doesn't require too much capital, human energy, or time to enter the market, people will enter it. And so you constantly have to be top of mind awareness because otherwise somebody else would take that top of mind awareness.
Yeah. And like Alan was touching on with the branded search, so if you think about it, I'm sure you do this as well, right? Like you might see whether it's a person or a product or something, you see an advertisement about them, but you still want to do your own research, right? So you'll go type in a name to Google or type in the name of the product and kind of read reviews and so on. So that's where people are kind of leaving a lot of money on the table. Those are probably the easiest conversions you're ever going to find. And we have data to back this up. I don't remember the numbers, but I know for a fact we were getting, I forget if it was under my name, like if you searched for my name or if you search for the product name, but it was one of the two where we were getting sales for $5. And so if people just see my ad, they'll go to you or they go to Google and they type in my name, and then, the ad for my product should show up right there because that's low hanging fruit. So that's kind of the most aware. And then if we go down one level to the product aware, this is where proof and, Alan talked about the sort of AID VVA model where it's about verification. And what was the second V?
Validation.
Validation, right? So this is where they're going to be heavily influenced by that kind of stuff, right? Because they're already, aware, they're already interested, there's already desire. But this is where those two V's come into play. So product aware people, they know what you're selling, but they maybe haven't seen enough yet. So testimonial ads and just proof and like case studies and that kind of thing tends to do really well for that awareness level. Then you have solution aware. These are people who they might know that their lawnmower is broken. So they know that they need to fix it, right? But they don't necessarily know about your product. So this is where you kind of want to go in and just name the desire, whether it's getting a new lawnmower or fixing the one that you have, and then kind of proving the solution and introducing your product, which sort of accomplishes or solves the problem that they have. And then the problem where I would say it's actually fairly similar. It's really about sort of naming the desire and really, have you heard that? And this is not a really question for Alan, but because I'm sure you have. But people talk about what is that formula? It's like PAS, right? Like problem and then agitate, solve, or something like that. Does that ring a bell, Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they're problem aware, sometimes all you have to do is spend a little bit of time sort of agitating the pain and kind of dramatizing it and making it more painful, because a lot of those people are kind of in a place where, yeah, sure, it would be nice to fix this problem, but it's not really a huge problem for me right now. Like it's not gonna ruin my day, it's not gonna ruin my week and whatever. So if you can dramatize that and amplify that tends to work for that. And the last one is the unaware, right? So this is where people don't even know that they have a problem and so on. And so one interesting thing that Eugene Schwartz, again, we want to give credit to him, was mentioning is, when you're at that place, the only thing that you can really talk about is the audience. Like there he gives this example of I think the headline was like why men crack, and then he goes into, I forget what the product was, but the headline is about like men, right? Like he can't talk about a product, he can't really talk about a problem because that's not really going to attract those kinds of people. And I know we wanted to talk about advertorials, and I feel like this is a really good space to usually do that, right? So Alan, maybe you can tell us a bit about what an advertorial is and like, where is there a need for that? Do you think that the unaware, sort of problem aware kind of levels is where that makes the most sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the biggest thing you got to realize when it comes to these levels, unaware, problem aware, solution aware, product aware, most aware, is that they're not completely distinct from each other. You have to look at them as a gradient, and there exists a place in between, right? And one of the things that most people, when they look at this model, they look at it as like end all be all on levels.
Right.
But there's also like these transitory levels in between, and that's where a lot of the sales actually happen in transitory levels. So, for example, like with the whole, if the market isn't aware, they don't know, or problem aware, they know what the problem is, but they don't know what the solution is, but they know what the solution, etc. What happens is that they are unaware of something. So, for example, let's say like webinars, right? Like people are aware that webinars can work, but they're completely unaware as to why they don't work, right? So now you have a two-thing component. You have a sub-awareness versus complete awareness. So most of you have a solution aware, which is people think webinars work, et cetera, et cetera. They get these sales, right? But then they can't make their webinar work, and they're unaware of what it is because they don't even know what the problem is, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to be in these in-between states to be able to identify it. And so if you're running an offer out there and you say, hey, here's why webinars don't work, and you give an example, which is, validation, verification. By the way, the difference between verification, about validations and verifications. Like if you make claims, case studies, etc., that person needs to be able to verify it using their own data or like experiences, etc. And validation is basically a component of reviews, what other people are saying, etc. So you have to marry those two to get that.
Hmm.
But that's the thing, like that the in between space is really really important, and how the gradient kind of like flows right between these two. And that's also like a big more art than science, I guess. Once you kind of start looking at things, you'll start to pick up patterns. But with that in mind, advertorials are interesting. We started doing advertorials back in 2007 or full six, I don't even know, forever ago, right? And we were running, promoting affiliate products, and we just had this idea because we were running a lot of traffic on various news sites, etc. Because back then that was hot, and so we postulated that, like, well, what if a thing that looks like a news site or a blog to describe this thing, because it's coming into an environment. Because what happens is, like, whenever you have a sale, we have this concept we teach them as attention isolation, right? So if you have attention isolation, conversions go up by default. So like if you have nothing else except attention isolations, conversion go up. And so, but the thing is, like, when you isolate the person into the environment that goes to consume your sales message, the environment has to be a familiar environment. So therefore, it doesn't, they're not thinking about the environment, they're focused on the sales message, right? So for example, like if you have a news website or a Google search and you click a button, it goes to this video, and it's like nothing but a black page of a video, those two environments are way different, right? And then the people either leave because the environment is unfamiliar, or they're constantly thinking about the environment and not focused on the sales message. So attention isolation doesn't work, right? And so what we started doing was, like, let's say we say, well, what if we made that intermediary page, which is called an advertorial, that basically has it looks like a news website or a blog or something, and legally you have to put on top this advertorial because otherwise it would be deceptive. So you have to be disclosed what it is. But the whole purpose of it isn't to really deceive anybody; is to have familiarity of environment. So when they transition into the sales part of the process, they buy, right? And when we started doing that, it worked really well, because you have to warm the traffic up, right? So the person goes from a certain environment, has to warm up a little bit to this environment, and then you go into the sales pitch and so forth, right? That works really well. Yeah, that's how advertorials work. And they're extremely powerful. And the way you do it, they're very simple, And the way the seed of an idea for advertorial was back in the day, I think in the 70s and 80s, direct response marketers, what they would do is they would print a sales letter on newspaper paper, right? Okay. And that's called like a tear sheet. So you literally take you print a sales letter on a newspaper with the headline and everything, and then you literally tear it off, and then you put an envelope and you mail it to somebody, right? So when the person gets the sales letter, it looks like they got a newspaper somebody mailed to them with an article that might be of interest to them, right? So for example, if you wanted to promote like a, let's say, weight loss supplement, you write a sales letter, put a newspaper style, you tear it off and you send it. There's like a little order coupon on the bottom and everything. And then the probability of that person consuming the sales message goes up. Yeah. And advertorials are the same thing. So there's this notion of, cold traffic, warm traffic, etc. And again, it's a gradient. Cold traffic is basically, let's say, running on homepage of Yahoo or something, where it's like people come there for 8 million reasons, and for some reason they're going to click on your ad and go buy your stuff. That's the hardest traffic to convert. So you have to have some type of advertorial. You move them out of that environment to start building, the sales pitch, the process, and everything, right? But at the same time, you got Facebook and Google, etc. And so that's like a gradient of cold, warm traffic, I guess. And if you look at like Facebook and Google, that's really not pure cold traffic, because there's a lot of intent behind that, right? So oftentimes on Facebook, oftentimes on Google, you don't really need advertorials to make things work, because the traffic is already pre-qualified, pre-selected, pre-vetted, pre-validated, etc. Whereas, but like a pure cold traffic, like the native ads, like the Google or web content, etc., you typically have to have an advertorial in order to make the offer.
Yeah, and I think as far as sort of being an unaware market goes, it's I guess a good way to warm people up, because of what you were saying is that there's a higher likelihood that they will actually consume the information, because it doesn't seem like an advertisement, right? It's just more sort of informative, I guess.
Well, what's interesting today, like I actually have this note for our next call, or with the people in the high-end program that we do. So I have this idea that's one of the back end call, is that the internet. One of the reasons you have to look at advertorials and everything else is the way you have to look at the evolution of the internet as a whole. right? So the internet went from being this military project and kind of they started one being used in universities and so forth, right? Initially, internet was built as a communication platform, right? Okay. Then at some point in transition into an information sharing platform, okay? Remember the blogger days, the bot days, etc. And then what it ended up turning into was a media platform, right? So right now, the internet as a whole, people think it's a communications platform, they think it's an information platform, and they think it's a media platform, right? It's all three, but one dominates the next, right? So right now, at this iteration of the internet, right now it's the media platform, right? And so the latter iterations dominate the prior iterations, right? Which is what allows us to make money. So when you're looking at advertorials and creating ads and everything, you have to realize that you're first focusing on a media platform, and then that media transmutes information, and then that information transmutes communication. So that's how you have to look at it. And so we're going to talk about that on the next call. But the reason that's important is because when you start looking at it like that, then you can see how when people are, consuming content, et cetera, consuming media and the rise of media, that it's more important than ever to actually get them to consume the content and the ads and everything else in order for the sale to take place. Now, before the sale will ever take place, so for example, before somebody ever, goes to your checkout page to enter credit card information, buy your stuff, they're going to have to read your sales page. Before they can read your sales page, they have to click on your ad or consume your ad. So you have this like media platform where you're getting them to consume your media, your little bit of media in the world at every step of the way.
All right, so that kind of sums up the different awareness stages. It's something really important to keep in mind because it kind of guides you a little bit as far as where you should be dictating your, advertising angles and so on. And, ideally you should kind of be advertising to all of these. Now, again, sort of reaching and converting the unaware market, it's not really that easy, but yeah, good to know. The next thing is market sophistication. And this is super interesting. This is also something that we want to give credit to Eugene Schwartz for sort of identifying. And this is sort of a cycle that every industry tends to go through. And as we walk you through this, you're going to realize how true this is. And, because certain industries have been around forever, right? Like weight loss and, I don't know, tobacco. Like there's all these different industries where the marketing is sort of going in this sort of cycle. And it's interesting. So basically the first stage, this is for the company that's sort of first in the market. It's pretty rare, I guess, to be entering a brand new market these days. But the way that you can do your marketing, if you're first in the market, is to be very simple and very direct. So we'll give you examples here as well that I've also picked from Eugene Schwartz. So when it comes to the fat loss market, you could just say, now lose ugly fat, right? So this is a headline that was actually used in the past. So just now lose ugly fat. So it's super direct, right? There's nothing fancy about it. So that's for the companies that are first in the market. They're just like, there's no, what?
I have an example to that, but go ahead.
That's just the first in the market. If you want to add another example, shoot for it. Go for it.
Yeah, I think a more modern example would be like Tesla, right? So when Tesla came out, it was like, hey, electric car, and that's it. They don't. That's all you got to say. It's
right.
Like electric car. So they're the first in the market, so everybody instantly got it. They know what a car is, and they didn't have to do much marketing to kind of explain what it is, etc.
So true.
But it's interesting if you contrast that to the Toyota Prius, which was the kind of the previous, electric car, they had to do a lot of explaining, right? Because it was that big. They had this thing, it was a hybrid. So they're like, well, it runs on gas, but it converts to electricity. And then when you brake, wind blows, and you got to throw up your sail, and all this stuff has to be like factored in for it to work, which was interesting because Tesla, when they came out, it was like electric car, and it was done. That's all they had to say, and everybody instantly understood what it was, right? So first to market is also like not just what the product does in the market, right? So essentially, it's not like it's what the product does in the market. So if it does something unique that nobody else does, whereas it's not necessarily like you can't have something that somebody else does, and then you can just say it differently. It doesn't work like that,
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because as we sort of give Tesla as the example for the rest of them, we're going to be sort of calling this before it happens. And this is exactly what's going to happen with that industry. So that's first in the market. Like Alan said, electric car. That's it. That's all you got to say. So then you go into market sophistication, sort of level 2, right? This is, and the way to do your marketing now is just make larger claims. So what's going to happen when, I don't know, Alan, do you know who's next as far as electric cars go? Like, I think Audi has one called e-tron or something, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like of course, what are they going to do? They're going to make larger claims. And ideally,
Hmm.
if they can back it up with a product, it's going to be like, oh, Tesla goes 300 miles, we do 400. So you just make larger claims. And with the weight loss, it was like lose up to 47 pounds in 4 weeks, blah, blah, blah. So they just up in the results a bit. So stage number three, you can't really get away anymore with just being really direct or just mentioning like one benefit, because that's kind of been done already. And so those campaigns get less and less effective. So the next thing you'll have to do is introduce a new mechanism to sort of refresh the product. So in the weight loss industry, what they did was they sort of started coming out with these diet plans and stuff where you didn't have to walk around hungry. So the headline that we pulled was, "I am 61 pounds lighter, never a hungry minute." Meaning, up until that point, it was all about losing weight, but the downside of that was you were going to have to diet and you were going to have to, cut down your calories so much that you were literally walking around hungry. And so the next stage is, okay, well, you're still going to get all the benefits, but that downside that you have, that we actually fixed that as well. So they introduced a new mechanism. And so I don't know what that would be with the electric car industry, but it's
It'd be probably like, solar panel body, like body
so you can
solar
charge all
panels.
the
So,
time.
yeah, while you drive, while you go, it's just
Yeah.
on all the time. You never have to like plug it in. So I think that's going to be the next iteration of it. And then, I mean, they're already doing it now with Tesla, because Tesla introduced like electric driving car, and it was like self-driving, right?
Yeah.
So that was the next thing. And then I think the one after it's going to be like this. They're already kind of doing it with the Tesla truck, which is the Cybertruck, which is like the truck bed with solar panels that charges itself.
Yeah. So we'll see more of that for sure in that industry. And then number four is similar to number two in that, okay, somebody introduced a new mechanism. So we're just going to enlarge that mechanism, bigger, faster, stronger, basically the same stuff, right? And then that's eventually going to also be less and less effective. And so step number five is what you can do is enlarge the market, meaning not necessarily create demand. Sometimes you can create demand, but also finding sort of untapped sources of the market. So the really good example here is when they introduced smoking to women, because at the time it was sort of socially unacceptable for women to smoke. It was just men who did it. And from what I was reading, the ad campaign that sort of introduced this idea was like, it was like an illustration of a man and a woman who just had sex, and the guy was smoking, and she was like, blow some smoke my way. And so that's how they introduced it, and they sort of enlarged the market for themselves. And the other thing that you can do is just introduce another sort of new mechanism. So in the cigarette industry, again, they started introducing filtered cigarettes, because before that, they were just kind of smoking it without a cigarette. And then everything recycled, right? So introduce a new mechanism, enlarge the mechanism, introduce a new mechanism, enlarge the mechanism, and on and on and on it goes. And so, yeah.
Now, all these five steps, first the market, make larger claims, introduce a new mechanism, enlarge a new mechanism, enlarge the market, are based on innovation, right? So typically, like all these claims are followed by people aren't just making claims to make claims for
Right.
the sake of making claims, right? Well, maybe some do, right? But you should. And so they're all based on innovation, right? So it's like if solar panels or body solar panels are innovated by Tesla, then that's going to go in the car, right?
Yeah.
So they can make those claims. So all the innovations and stages, the market sophistication, are built on innovations. That's why Peter Drucker talks about innovation is really important, right? So everybody should read his work as well. So like for us, what we do with our Meta clients is we focus on innovating all the time, doing new things, because if we don't innovate the markets, somebody's going to innovate the market. So it might as well be us.
Yep.
And then like from that innovation, we go to the market sophistication. So either it's going to be like you increase the market sophistication through your marketing, or it's going to happen without you. And the only way you can do it is through constant innovation, right? Now, you can't innovate being what's that? They call it in a startup like fast follow, where it's like somebody else that innovates, you see what they're doing and you're racing and trying to do what they do. So you're kind of like next to them. So it's like Uber and Lyft, like, Uber started and Lyft, I think Uber was the first and then Lyft was like maybe a few weeks, or
Right.
it was the other way around. I don't know. It was maybe the other way around, but they were there, right? Like they were trying to fast follow and they're trying to innovate, et cetera, right? So you have to like not look at the market, innovate for your own sake. And the only way you innovate for your own sake is to have what we call a customer intimacy, right? So it's like the way you have customer intimacy is you have to be really close to your customers. You have to talk to them, listen to them, pay attention to them, see what their experience is with the product and service, and see how they use it in adoption. So for example, a lot of this whole thing is like, content is king. It's not. It's like ideas are king. The value of ideas is king, right? And then, but more importantly, like the adoption of implementation of your ideas and stuff. That's the only thing that matters, right? And so that drives innovation forward, which drives the market sophistication model forward, which allows you to win long term. And so Apple is notorious for that. Like Apple tracks everything you do on your phone. And what happens with Apple, every iPhone that comes out is based on, all those little touches, the way you touch your phone, the way you hold your phone, etc. It's all being sent to Apple. So they know exactly how you interact with your phone. And so that's why every iteration of the iPhone feels very natural. It feels very organic. Like, oh, it should have been like this from the beginning. You know what I mean? It's because you have like millions and millions of people touching the phone and using it, moving things around, goes back. There's this controversy. But the thing is, like, what I see happening a lot in our industries is us as marketers, a lot of them, imagine it's like imaginary wall behind you and the customers, and you're throwing over like marketing ideas, and like you're hoping they land somewhere, and then somebody at the other end throws you money, right? That's a difficult thing. You got to get rid of that wall.
Yeah. And before we move on to selling to emotions and outcomes, I just remembered another product that I recently saw ads for, and it hit me that it is sort of going through this market sophistication cycle, and that is sort of shaving razor blades for men. So the razor blade, they started off with just one blade, right? And then for each product that came out, as far as innovation goes, all they did was they started adding more blades. So it was like, okay, well, we have 2 razor blades, and then we have 3, and then we have 4, and then I think the biggest one I saw was 5. And then recently, it's funny, like the new mechanism that they're using to try to get, sales now is they went back to 1 razor blade, and that became sort of the unique selling proposition of that product, which is hilarious. But you can kind of see that market sophistication cycle taking place with so many products. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about is this idea of when we discussed this, I was telling Alan that we need to talk about, selling to different emotions. And he has a point to make about that as well, about how that's kind of irrelevant ultimately because we are selling to outcomes. So Alan, why don't you kind of describe your thoughts on that? And then I will walk through some of those different emotions as well, because I think it helps people sort of decide which direction to take their ads. But what do you mean by selling to outcomes?
Yeah, so I mean, people don't realize that like people aren't buying your product or service for the sake of buying your product or service. They're buying it for like the outcome they envision in the product and service, right? So, for example, like if you let's say a Tesla, let's use them as an example. Like if you buy a Tesla, like what outcome are you buying, right? You're buying an outcome where you never have to get gas again. Okay, you have this like awesome piece of technology. It's ridiculously fast. It can drive itself. That's the outcome. So you're always, and then it's like, but beyond that, what's the outcome? It's like, for example, I saw this Joe Rogan podcast. That was when he bought a Tesla. And, when he's stuck in LA traffic, he loves it. He just doesn't have to do anything. The thing drives it for him. So he bought that outcome, right? So everybody's buying outcomes, right? Nobody's really buying things for the sake of buying things, because right now in the world, we're living in very abundant times, right? Where credit and everything is very easy to get. And so there's this excess capital everywhere, right? And like, so even though somebody might not make a lot of money, they still have access to credit and they have the ability to buy things that give them outcomes. For example, people, Apple is an example of this where 10 years ago, iPhone was like $300, right? Remember, phones were like $120, $150. It was a lot of money, right? And now it's like iPhones are hitting like $1,800, $2,000, right? I think $1,800 is the last iPhone I bought. So it's like $1,800 for a phone, right? And people are paying it. It's like, I remember when iPhone X came out, it was like $1,000 and everybody was like, oh, that's ridiculous. And then it broke all sorts of sales records, right? And same thing with shoes. It's like before Jordans, it was like, $50, $60 shoes. And then it came out, it was like $150 shoes, $180 shoes, and people like started looking at it as like a status symbol, right? So it was like outcomes, like what outcome? I want the shoe to do this beyond utility, right? Like what is it beyond utility? It's not just a shoe I wear, whatever. It's like it gives you status, etc., phone, etc. So people are always buying outcomes. They're never just buying this thing for the sake of buying it. And because we live in abundant times and there's just so much credit available to everybody that everybody's just buying outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely true. And with regards to the emotions thing, I think ultimately what they're buying is the outcome. But I think emotions can be used to, first of all, get their attention, but also, to just kind of get them to take action sometimes. So I just kind of wanted to go through some of the emotions and give you guys some examples of advertisements where those emotions are being used. And then my whole point really is not for you to become some psychologist overnight, but just realize that we all do have different emotions. And I think if you're not invoking any emotion whatsoever, usually you will not have as good of a response. And this is funny coming from me, who I'm super logical, right? So I'm the worst copywriter in the world because I don't get any emotions out of anybody reading anything that I write. It's just, facts and logic. But in any case, to kind of go through some, we have happiness, anger, disgust, sadness, and fear. We also have surprise. So I pulled up some ads to kind of walk through these, and happiness is by far the number one most used. And I don't know which one comes to mind for you, Alan, but for me, it's definitely just the old Coca-Cola like Christmas ad. It's all just like smiles everywhere. And, if you want to get the outcome, if you want to get the smile, you need a Coca-Cola basically. Then you have anger. Oftentimes you'll see this in like political campaigns. So I found one with Trump where it says, Trump fooled us once. Will he scam Florida again? And it's like, it's supposed to just trigger you and turn you into somebody who's really angry and doesn't want to vote for Trump. Then you have disgust, smoking stuff, anti-smoking really, where they put all kinds of nasty graphics to get you to stop smoking. It's usually like, I don't know, CDC or somebody like that running ads of that kind. Then you have sadness. It makes me think of World Food Program. It's like, some sad child who's starving. And I found one ad where it's like, can you hear me? Every year, 3 million children die of hunger, that kind of thing. The fear one is also very, very powerful. And one of my favorite ads ever, just because I think it's clever, is this old newspaper ad where the neighbor is looking at his neighbor's house and he says, Jones must be broke. And to me, what that is kind of like just that mental fear of having your neighbor or your other social, your social circle thinking that you are broke, which is like, to a lot of people, that's really scary. And yeah, it's a really powerful ad. And the last one that I'll mention here is and I like this one, it's the idea of surprise. So the example that I pulled was about detergent. So when I talk about surprise here, so I'll just tell you that, okay? So the ad is basically a couple of different detergents, for, I don't know, cleaning windows, cleaning your bathtub and so on. And it says like, children sees things differently. So you see the detergent and then you see what the kids see, which is kind of like all these different detergents have turned into these, animals and stuff that they want to play with, kind of introducing this idea that, hey, to them, this is going to look really inviting. They might kind of want to open this up and have a drink and see what happens. And so I like it because it's surprise, because you're introducing a new idea, and we're going to talk about disruptive ideas. But it's also just kind of, capturing your attention and introducing a new idea, and teaches you something as well. So there's a bit of value in that. But just kind of wanted to introduce some different categories of emotions and different ads that go along with that. Anything to add to that section, Alan? So fear and pain, I think, go together.
Yeah, fear and shame definitely go together. Yeah. Emotions are interesting to use in ads. I think though, it's like with emotions, you have to selling to emotions, and then it's like selling to outcomes are kind of like interlinked, right? So if you're selling to, like, I think selling to outcomes, it should be a like dominant,
yes,
like a lead role of an ad, and then emotion should be a supporting ad. So for example, like this Trump ad you mentioned, Trump fooled us once, will he scam us? They're selling the outcome of Trump not winning, right? Somebody else winning based on their whoever they want, right? And then it's like they're using the emotion of anger to trigger that outcome, right? So they're trying to do two things at once. Okay, now again, gradient. It's not, and you can have multiple goals in here, right? A lot of these ads though, like they're created that we just referenced, are branded ads. Mass market branded ads. And so one thing to note is that we don't do mass market branded ads because, that's not in our wheelhouse. We do direct response ads. And so like how you approach that has to be adapted to your situation, and then also like where the person is in their space. So for example, like I know, like as far as disgust goes, like Gary Halbert, rest in peace, he had this ad where he actually wanted to use this model to sell weight loss. And he used the disgust emotion on radio ads. And he ran this ad where he just flat out told people how disgusting they are for being fat. They need to do something about it. And it's true. Like look it up. And it didn't work at all. Like it flopped, right? So you have to be really careful, like how you use it. And you have to say, well, what's because everything you do it generates a reaction, right? You got to be like, well, what reaction it's gonna. Okay. So because like he used disgust emotion, then that basically triggered shame and anger, which was directed at him, right? So if you look at Trump, like anger, like they're trying to trigger anger at them. So you have to, when you're running something to emotions, whatever emotion you generate, that emotion will be directed somewhere, right? And so you have to be aware that it doesn't get directed back at you. So when Halbert did that whole making, fat people are disgusting, they need to lose weight, that triggered two other emotions, which was shame and anger. They were aimed at him. He was trying to generate sadness, generate the sale, right? So you have to be really careful on how you dictate these things. And then some markets are just based on, deep-rooted emotions. Like the survival market's always based on fear
Right.
and a little bit of anger. And they're always trying to, kind of stir that up. But the main thing to know is like the outcomes are like what they ultimately want. And then when you're selling to emotions, that emotion has to be directed at something or somebody there. Now, you got to be careful because like if you're using emotions on your sales page and then you have a different type of emotions on your ad, that's going to create incongruency. And then that's not going to work at all, right? So typically on a sales page, you have to kind of be more to the outcome. And then you can use the ads to kind of direct that emotion to generate the other emotion, which you can direct somewhere else.
Yeah, and you will attract what you put out there. So like Alan said, you want to be careful with what you do. And this is why the vast majority of ads kind of fall into the happiness category because, that's really what the companies are selling. And that's probably the kind of customers that they want.
Yeah, because like if you're running out there, for example, like shame ads, whatever, then like they're going to start associating you with shame. You know what I mean? Because like every time somebody sees your ad, it's linked to shame, then it's like, you're going to be associated with shame or whatever. And then it's like, or anger. And like people look at the ad, they get angry and then it doesn't work, then it's like eventually it just fades out. So think of emotions as like seasoning on food. Like, use it to taste, but, don't go all like, open the thing and just throw it up, focus on selling into outcomes and then use emotions here and there as like a touch to, push it to the right sale.
100%. All right, that wraps up the things to consider when creating ads lesson. And the next one is ad networks and why people visit them.